Welcome to the Creative Warriors podcast, the heart and soul of photography. I'm Ariel, Faith, your host. So we are going to welcome back Janoiris to our Creative Warriors podcast. Welcome back.
Hi, everyone.
And we learned a little bit about some of the ways that she uses shadow and light in her expression, but we wanted to dig a little deeper into that and then talk about some of the challenges that she has to be expressive in her work, if she has any challenges, because I think she rocks this, by the way.
No,
so some of these techniques, and we talked a little bit about shadow and light last time, but other more subtle effects can be things like balance and tension, some of the energy, the space and scale, the way the closer an object is larger, etc. The illusion of depth, framing, things we include versus exclude in a photograph sometimes can have a powerful expression all by themselves. And then when we focus using a shallow depth of field or a very, deep depth of field. So some of those photography skills and things help us express certain things. So what are those, or how do you use some of those type of elements in your work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's fun because I don't always get to chat about these technical details about photography. In the podcast I usually go to, we're always talking about the messaging and everything, but this is fun. I get to talk about the art part.
Yeah, exactly.
So with Boudoir, I get to experiment a lot with a lot of different things. So when it comes to different effects or different aspects of photography that we use, like tension or balance, or all these things. So I like to have a big mix of both. So I like to have I have some close-ups that are super sexy because of just, maybe a lip or a clavicle or something like that, that is just detail. And so for that, I try to, focus, have that nice bokeh and really get in those details. And then there are other elements where I want the woman to, we were talking a little bit last time about that cinematic feeling where it's storytelling. And that for that, you want to include the entire room, right? Or the whole space, or, if it's a vanity or if it's a chair or whatever that is telling a story. And then I want to include more of that, which is where I get to be creative and have a fun studio. That way it can always tell a story. So it's a mix of both, because you do want to be able to focus on that person and there not be a ton of distractions, so that it's not about the room, but it's about the woman. But there is some beauty also to telling a story. And in order to tell that story, you do have to incorporate other elements of the room. So I try to have, a mix of both in my galleries. I think that especially when it comes to making albums afterwards, a lot of times I like to lay it out in ways that tell a story, in ways that make sense, like a series, and not just pose in a way that doesn't connect, right? So you want it to feel more story-like. And it also depends on what the purpose is for the woman that comes in the room. If she's trying to gift it to her husband, for example, then maybe it has a little bit more of a story because you're kind of telling something to him throughout the pages. If she's coming in because she just, accomplished a milestone or is trying to perceive herself differently, maybe she has overcome an illness or she has, reached a milestone in her body change, maybe losing or gaining weight or becoming somebody physically, then maybe there's a different emphasis. Maybe I am doing more posing, and I am, when it comes to those milestones, for example, if she has just reached a body that she has been working on and wants to show that body off, then it might be more posy and less storytelling, It might be more about flexing certain muscles that she's worked on or what have you. If she has just overcome something emotionally and not necessarily a physical milestone, but it's an emotional one or a mental one, she has just entered or left a relationship and certain things like that, then maybe it's more about the emotion of what's happening, right? For some of those, I might use just a seamless backdrop, paper, and do boudoir that way. And there's no bedroom and there's no fancy chairs and there's no extra fluff. It's just her, and she's just wrapped in blankets maybe or something like that. And I get to throughout that, I'll communicate with her, I'll chat with her, I'll ask questions, and then I'll be quick to respond with my camera so that I can capture that essence of her laughter. I act a fool and, it makes her laugh, or I ask her questions that are emotive and maybe give her some emotion. And so it really depends on the goal, right?
Okay.
Of the session. And I think that that's part of that communication with your client to make sure, like, is this a gift? Is this for yourself? Have you accomplished something, achieved something? Are you trying to get out of a rut mentally? What are we accomplishing with the photos? And then that kind of informs where I go next.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, cool. Just a couple more technical questions. I don't usually get into the technical too much,
No,
but
you're fine.
In this case, I thought it was a good one. But when you're shooting a woman, there's a couple different techniques of posing. There's very static posing, and then there's more fluid posing. So the person's moving as they're posing slowly. But do you have like a minimum shutter speed that you would like? And obviously, each lens is a little different in terms of how low you can take that shutter speed. But is there a point where you know that if I shoot at this speed, I'm going to get too many blurry images if the person's moving in that shot? Just curious.
That's a good question. I have to be honest, I pay less attention to my settings than I do to my woman when I'm there. Like I'm more attentive to what I'm getting from her and reacting accordingly. So I do my test shots before she comes in, and then I kind of stay there the rest of the time. I don't pay too much attention to my settings the whole, maybe that's a good or a bad thing. I'm not sure. But also ever since I started using my 8200, that has helped a ton because my lighting is more consistent, and I don't really have to worry. Once I set my settings, I know they're not going to shift too much. I'm not going to have to worry about changing too many things. Maybe I'll move my light around, to move the shadows like we were talking about and giving a different directional light. But generally speaking, I'm not messing with my settings once they're set. And I think that having that strobe has really helped with that. That way I don't have to worry about it. And it also has improved having my photos be really text sharp because I have a really great output of light and I don't really worry too much about the movement, unless I'm trying to be intentionally creating some of that movement, which I'm not really a fan of. I know it's a big trend right now, the blur effect and all this, that shutter drag and all that. I'm not a big fan. I think it works better maybe for like couples portraiture or maybe something like that. But for me, I like text sharp and I like to keep things like true to color as much as possible. I'm not that much onto, as trends change when it comes to editing, I find that mine stay the same. I'm really high.
That's your voice.
Yeah. I'm really contrast, vivid color, contrast, but like as much true to color as possible. So if I want to add elements of texture or color, I'm doing that on site, like into the set. Maybe if I'm wanting to add more visual interest, I want to add that to the set and then just be able to color correct and not have to, put so much effort into the post-production. Plus I have a pretty short turnaround, which boudoir photographers, some of them have an even shorter turnaround than me, but like girls are sitting back at the studio doing their reveals a week later. And there's a lot of photos to process. There's a lot of editing that takes place. Some boudoir photographers will do just color correction and not do any kind of editing, like retouching, right, before the clients see them. For me, it's important that the edit is completely done before they see them. Only because for this specific type of photography, for me, I feel like I don't want her picking herself apart. And so I want to make sure that the edit is pristine before they see it. So that's why it takes me a little bit longer. So it takes me a week. But even then, a week is pretty short. I can't sit here and try to do it all in post. I want to put it all while I'm there, adding visual interest. So yeah. And then when it comes to fluid or static posing, which you were talking about, I'm glad you asked that too. I think that I have a set of poses I always do try to hit because I know, on a business side, I know that they're bestsellers. I know that they're going to work and that most body types and most women are going to love and like themselves in that pose. But I do try to do sort of like a flow posing because boudoir is very physical. It's a whole workout, I tell my girls, you better stretch before you come over to me, which is actually part of their prep work. And I tell them exactly what things to do and how to stretch and stuff. It's a whole workout. It is a whole effort. And so I don't want my girls to start looking tired in the face from all the going up and going down and going crouching and going laying and then to flip around. There's so much going on. So I try to flow their poses in a way that makes more sense, like movement wise. That way they're moving smoothly from one thing to another. And there's not so much, physical strain and effort, because then by the end of the session, they're exhausted. I mean, they're switching outfits. There's 3 outfits in my standard session. So we do basically 15, 20 minutes of each outfit. And then we have an outfit change. We come back. It's a lot of effort is my point. So I try to do flow posing, but same thing. There are certain movements that I will do, certain poses that include movement. Most of the time, the movement happens in the breathing. So the breathing, I focus a lot on my clients' breathing to create certain facial expressions that you want in this kind of photography, or to kind of release or restore air in certain parts of the body, right? So I'm using air a lot as my ally to sort of help with posing and to relax certain things, because women in trying to look a certain way or in trying to tuck certain things, they get very, you lock in and you get tense. So I use breathing or certain exercises, like maybe, for example, I'll have a woman say, or I'll say to her, why don't you give yourself like a scalp massage, like a nice scalp massage, just dig your nails into your, so I'll say certain things that might feel like movement, but will come across static, obviously in photos. So why don't you relax your neck and just kind of wind all the way around and have your neck, just give yourself a nice neck rub, right? And so it is a movement technically, but it's a very, like you're saying, a slow movement that just kind of aids them into relaxing into a certain pose I'm looking for.
Yeah. Okay, cool. One more question for this episode, and then we're going to come back again, but this might be a bigger question. So, and I'm going to ask it, and you're going to let me know
No problem.
if it's too long of a question or too big of a question. So how do you overcome the fear of being vulnerable with your work? You particularly, because the lens is also a reflection of you and how you see, right? It's not just the person being photographed. There is a connection between those two things, what you're seeing, and to really get very good at your work, which I know you are, there's a level of inner vulnerability that you had to have overcome. Some level of fear, level of your own body, confidence, etc. So how have you personally traveled through that journey?
This is really interesting. I think that my clients help me more than they know. And I think that it heals me too when they're in the room, when they're in the studio. I think that it has been valuable for me as a woman to see just a gamut of spectacularly stunning women that sadly struggle with similar things. And I think that has put into perspective just how similar we are, more than we think, and how many of our struggles we share in common, despite what any woman looks like on the outside, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter.
Everything in between.
The same.
There's very similar struggles.
Yeah.
They're rooted in a lot of similar experiences, a lot of similar messaging, a lot of the same stories that we've believed. And I think that no matter what a woman looks like, she tends to struggle with similar issues, and it sees herself less kindly than others see her. And so having that experience has helped heal me too, understanding that, I don't know, it has maximized my compassion for the women that surround me and helped me to be a better aid to them, because I recognize how much on a same playing field we are than we think. So in that regard, I think that they help me, right? And then I think it helps me to I try to be very intentional to not project my own insecurities onto another woman's body type. What I mean by that is what might be an insecure feature for me might be her favorite thing about her body. And while women, we do have certain things, certain common areas that we don't love all the time, or some are areas that you might find more in common, with other women that you're like, yeah, me too. I don't like this area, or I struggle with this area, or I try to hide this area. But there might be something that I love about me that is actually the thing she wishes to change.
Right.
Or that she wishes was different. Or something that I see her and I think, gosh, you have the most spectacular fill in the blank. And that's exactly what she's like, I hate that, right?
Right.
And I even learned that I recently lost my grandmother, but so it's probably why I think of her often when that's okay, thank you. But she had these beautiful, I thought they were so beautiful freckles everywhere, right? She had, her arms were full of freckles. She had so many freckles. And I thought, even as a kid, I just remember thinking, these are so beautiful. Like, I just love her freckles. Before freckles were a trend, right? Because now people even draw them on. but freckles, and I used to tell her, I just love your freckles. And she hated her freckles. And she would do anything to get rid of them. And she would always be buying lotions and creams and things and saying that she was going to get rid of them and what have you. And she would always look down.
The older you get, the uglier they are. I mean, that sounds funny, but when you're young and freckles are cute, but the older you get all those sunspots with all that other stuff. And you're like,
down to her arms. And then she would make a random comment and say, you see this freckle right here? It's lighter. I'm getting it. It's lightening up. And it's so fun. It was so funny to me growing up, but that's kind of the dynamic, isn't it? Like I would just think, I just love her freckles. They're beautiful. And I would say that to her and she would say, don't say that. I just want to get rid of them. I want to get rid of them. So yeah, I try not to project. I think it's good for me to maybe highlight with a lot of respect and a lot of care. I'm very, very careful about how I make comments about a woman's body when it comes to a session like this. I'm very careful. But I do want to encourage and motivate a woman to see an aspect of her as beautiful that maybe she never perceived as such. So I do sometimes make certain comments with respect about her body. But I try not to project what might be an insecurity for me. And I try to be very communicative with her so that she can tell me this is an insecure area or this is my favorite area. And I can work my photography to highlight that and to maybe work on those areas that she needs help on, right? And not just, what a standard, this is my standard photos. These are my go-to poses. And everybody will be in them regardless of what she feels or that's just not sensitive to what every woman needs. So yeah, I think that has been my process. I do think that as a woman, I think we're always trying to improve and change. And I think that's a very human thing to do. I don't think that that's the issue. I can't say that I'm where I want to be physically, but I do think that so long as I'm still serving this body right now, I'm still dressing it, I'm still styling it, right? I'm still nurturing it, I'm still feeding it, I'm still moving it, all these different things in my body, then I still stand a good chance at being a good leader, a good guide, a good mentor to my ladies, even if I'm not at my optimal place physically, right? As long as I have a healthy relationship and I've reconciled to my body, knowing that I'm in constant change, but making peace with where I'm at and serving my body in its current state, then I think I can still be a good guide to my clients. And I think that's what I try to focus on.
That's really neat. Because working with women, the insecurities are so strong for so many people. Mm-hmm. And being able to help them see what we see. Like, it's weird. When you look at yourself, you have a million things you would change and whatever, right? But when you look at someone else, you don't even go through that exercise in your brain.
Right.
You don't look at everything wrong and everything. And of course, you're not looking at a magnifying and, and sometimes I don't even notice a scar. I won't even notice it
at all. Right.
Until I pull it up on the computer, and the way the cameras work is some of those things become more prominent, but you never noticed it in real life. Yeah. So that's where the retouching is, when you subdue it like you did in real life, it becomes more natural. least that's been my experience. But it's we're so hard on ourselves.
We are. We're very hard. You know, there's a poem, and I really wish I knew her name off the top of my head. Maybe if I think of it, you can add it in the show notes. But there's a poem running around on Instagram. It's a poet I follow, and one of her lines, she talks about how like, I never went to a public pool and remembered somebody's like body forever, you know, something like that. Yeah. Basically saying like, I never interacted with somebody and thought about like how crooked their teeth were, or like, I never like, there's nothing in my mind that remembers those aspects of a person. You know, I remember how easy it was to talk to them, or I remember, you know,
the smile in their eyes,
how exuberant, their laughter was, or how, you know, how kind they felt, or how warm their essence was, or how, like, you don't remember in your mind, there isn't a staple of all these things that maybe we highlight or we focus on. It's interesting how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that it's also important as photographers, especially in a genre like mine, to be really honest and sincere to my clients. And I try to be about my own vulnerabilities and my own, you know, insecurities and my own journey towards becoming who I want to be. I think that right now in society, there's a lot of messaging that in an effort to empower women and make them feel more confident in their insecurities, kind of taps them, you know, pats them on the back and says, just, you know, stay as you are. You're great exactly as you are. And, you know, that's awesome. And I just think that, yes, you're amazing. And because, you know, as amazing as your body is, it's the least amazing thing about you. I always say that. So there's a lot of amazing qualities about you as you are right now, regardless of your body, whether it's amazing to you or not amazing to you. But I think that there is growth to be had. There is change to be had. You will never reach, even if you reach whatever goal it is that you had in your mind to achieve with your body or with yourself, you will get there and think, oh, I can do more. I can change this. This is not what I want anymore, or I want more, right? And so you're never going to get to a place where you're exactly where you want to be. So I think change is important, and it's important to be sharing with your community. This is what I'm doing to apply the things I teach you. You know, I'm human. I may be a step or two in front of you, which is why I can be your guide, but I'm human and I'm still have these battles. I still have these issues.
Yeah. The compassion is super important.
Right. And it makes you human and more accessible as a person. And so that's part of the vulnerabilities too, that you are clear and open and honest about your vulnerability. I think that, you know, it's important. I can't say that I share everything. And I think that that's the mistake that we make with social media. There's a distinct line of like sharing everything that you do share authentically versus sharing everything.
Or oversharing.
Oh, right. So I don't share everything. I don't share with my community things that I don't want somebody to have an opinion about. I don't share them because people will have an opinion. So if it's going to trigger me, you know, if it's going to trigger me, or if it's going to be an issue for me, for somebody to have an opinion, then I just don't share it because they're entitled to their opinion. They're going to have it. So I share the things that I'm okay with people having an opinion about. And I share those things. So that means that not everything, in fact, very few things about my relationship are shared. And even though I teach about intimacy and I teach about relationships, that doesn't mean that you like my audience knows everything about my relationship or my intimacy. Right. But what I do share, I share authentically. Right. So it's not about, oh, you have to be transparent. That's what I've heard a lot, right? You have to be transparent. Well, I think I have to be clear and honest, but I don't have to be completely transparent to everyone in the sense that everything I have to share doesn't have to be shared equally with everybody that follows me or knows me or has any access to me. I think people should have access to you at different layers. And so my audience overall, this broad audience that may follow me, they get honesty and authenticity from me, but there are still aspects of me that are reserved for people in my inner circle. And I think that that's fair. And I think that everybody who has a business, every woman listening who has a business needs to make that distinction for herself. What is okay for you to share? What do you feel comfortable with people having access to about your life? And then whatever that is, share about it authentically and honestly. And that makes you vulnerable and accessible. But do keep some things that are yours. And I think that that's healthy.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I know branding is a little different of a genre, and you do some of that work too. But, one of the conversations I always have prior to a shoot is the need for them to be able to define what they want to share with their ideal client, right? What is it that, and where is there a boundary that we don't want to go? Having a clear vision of what you want to share with marketing is very different than what you would share on your homepage with your community of friends. And understanding that they're allowed to have a difference, I think, is very important.
Yes.
That they don't have to share both, right? You can keep that separate. And I know I've been in business for like 30 something years, and mine have always been separate, always been very different, because the work me is a different person. I'm still me, but it's a different, it takes different pieces of me, the work me, right? Whereas the playful me can be as playful as I want and no one cares. You can't, you can't walk around goofy at work sometimes. They don't always
well, and that's the thing. I think that there's, it's such
more
such
fun
an
with
interesting
photography, but
that's such an interesting conversation because I do think that there has to be some consistency in how you present yourself to everyone, right? So like if somebody, the other day I was at the library with my little and I was just mom me, right? But somebody came up to me and was like, oh, I just heard this podcast that you were on and I just loved it and it's so good to meet you, etc. It's important for me to be consistent enough that I am still the recognizable person that you would see on the podcast. I'm being mom right now. And like you're saying, I'm being silly and it's, funny with my kiddo because I'm being a mom, right? But I do think that there's some level of consistency, especially when it comes to branding, that you're not just like putting up a facade of what you think you should look like in business. And then if somebody meets you on the street, there's a disconnect to who you actually are, right? So I think it's true. You're sharing aspects of you as long as it's still you across the board. There's a consistent element that it's you. You're not just like faking a personality for being online or for your business. But then, there are certain elements that only my husband gets or only my, my close friends get. I'm consistent across the board. You're going to find that all these different elements of me show up in different areas of business.
Yes.
Yeah. But they're not
at different levels.
At different levels. Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
I agree with that.
Okay. Very cool. Great talking to you again. We're going to come back again and talk a little bit about the artistic heart part of photography. So that will be our final episode together. So we will come back again and chat more with you.
Looking forward to it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, The Creative Warriors, the female heart and soul of photography, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the conversation going. Stay curious and have a happy artistic journey. Thank you for listening to the Creative Warriors podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. See you next episode.